For decades, three companies quietly controlled almost everything about the cruise industry: Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean Group, and MSC Cruises. Between them, they operated over 228 ships, carried nearly 80% of all cruise passengers on Earth, and generated over $72 billion in revenue in 2025 alone. They had the ports, they had the ships, they had the private islands, and they had very little reason to worry about anyone else. But then, something unexpected happened. A wave of competitors showed up from directions nobody predicted, and the big three didn't just respond. They panicked into the most expensive shipbuilding arms race in maritime history, a $76.5 billion frenzy of mega ships, private islands, and desperate strategy pivots. So how did Richard Branson's floating nightclub, a Disney theme park that sails, and a Saudi Arabian sovereign wealth fund force the three most dominant cruise companies on the planet into full-on survival mode? That's exactly what we're about to break down. To understand why the big three were vulnerable, you need to understand the numbers heading into 2024. The cruise industry had just pulled off one of the wildest comebacks in travel history, going from literally 0 passengers during the 2020 pandemic shutdown to a projected 37.7 million passengers by 2025. Revenue surged past $72 billion. Carnival Corporation alone carried 41% of all global cruise passengers across its 9 different brands. Royal Caribbean held about 27%. MSC, the privately held Swiss-Italian giant, was growing the fastest with roughly 10% market share and 14 brand new ships on order. On paper, that looks unbeatable. But underneath those headline numbers, the ground was shifting. New to cruise passengers, people who had never set foot on a cruise ship before, surged to 31% of all cruisers in 2024, up from 24% just 5 years earlier. The average cruiser age dropped to 46, with over a third of all passengers now under 40. Solo travelers doubled to 12% of all bookings. The customer base was getting younger, more adventurous, and less loyal to the traditional cruise experience. And here's where it gets interesting. The big three weren't the ones attracting most of these new customers. Smaller, hungrier competitors were. The first real threat came from a billionaire who openly admitted he didn't even like cruises. Richard Branson had dreamed about disrupting the cruise industry since he was 27 years old. In 2014, backed by $700 million from Bain Capital, he finally launched Virgin Voyages. The total investment would eventually hit around $3 billion for 4 identical ships built by Fincantieri in Genoa, Italy. The first ship, Scarlet Lady, was a 110,000 gross ton vessel carrying 2,770 passengers across 1,400 cabins, 90% of which had balconies. She was delivered on Valentine's Day 2020 at a cost of around $710 million. The timing could not have been worse. COVID shut down every cruise line on the planet just weeks before Scarlet Lady's maiden voyage. That brand new $710 million ship sat empty in a harbor for 18 months without carrying a single paying passenger. But when Virgin Voyages finally launched, the product was unlike anything the cruise industry had ever seen. Every ship enforces a strict 18+ adults only policy, the first major cruise line to do so across its entire fleet. There is no main dining room and no buffet. Instead, over 20 restaurants are all included in the fare, curated by Michelin-starred chefs with 0 upcharges. There is a permanent tattoo parlor called Squid Ink, the first at sea. There are regularly scheduled drag shows, the only ones at sea. There are DJ-led pool parties called Scarlet Night, where the entire ship turns red. And there's a 2-story nightclub called The Manor, inspired by Branson's original Virgin Records studio in London. Branson was blunt about who he was targeting. He said he wanted to attract people who would never, ever dream of going on a cruise ship, and travel critics noticed. Frommers called it rowdier than Royal Caribbean, classier than Carnival, and younger than Holland America, saying Virgin beckoned to millennials who would never normally go on a mass-market cruise. The big three publicly dismissed the threat. At the Seatrad E Global Conference in 2021, Royal Caribbean CEO Richard Fain said new players are actually a big benefit because they attract attention and add more to demand than to supply. MSC's Pierfrancesco Vago was sharper, saying the fact that Virgin was building 3 ships without testing them on the market would be a complexity. And Carnival CEO Arnold Donald offered some patronizing advice, telling Branson to listen to his prospective guests. But those confident sound bites didn't match the numbers that followed. By 2024, Virgin Voyages posted 60% revenue growth over the prior year. Their Black Friday 2024 became the single highest booking day in company history, up 300% year over year. And the most terrifying number for the Big Three was this. Over 70% of all new Virgin Voyages bookings came from first-time cruisers. Virgin only had 4 ships, just 1.4% of total market share against the Big Three's 228 vessels. They weren't going to bankrupt Carnival, but they proved something dangerous. There was a massive audience of younger, wealthier travelers who wanted to cruise. They just didn't want to cruise on a traditional cruise ship, and the Big Three had been completely ignoring them. If you're finding this useful, hit subscribe. We cover cruise industry stories like this regularly. Now, Virgin Voyages was a guerrilla insurgency. What Disney Cruise Line did was a full-scale military invasion. Disney announced it was tripling its cruise fleet from 4 ships to 13 ships by 2031, with a total investment conservatively estimated between $10 and $15 billion. And unlike Virgin's boutique operation, Disney commands pricing power that should genuinely terrify the competition. Disney charges families 2 to 4 times more than competitors for a comparable cabin and still runs at 97% occupancy. The assault began with Disney Wish in July 2022, a 144,000 gross tons, $1.1 billion ship carrying 4,000 passengers. It featured the first Disney attraction at sea, a 760-foot water coaster called Aquamouse, a Worlds of Marvel cinematic dining experience, and an Arendelle frozen dining adventure with live performances. Disney Treasure followed in December 2024, and Disney Destiny launched in November 2025 with a heroes and villains theme that included a Wakanda-inspired Grand Hall with a Black Panther statue and Spider-Man on the stern. But the real shock was Disney Adventure. When a Hong Kong shipyard went bankrupt in 2022, Disney swooped in and acquired the 75% complete hull of an unfinished megaship. They spent a reported $1.8 billion retrofitting it into a 208,000 gross tons monster, one of the 10 largest cruise ships ever built, and the first 4-funneled passenger vessel since RMS Aquitania retired in 1950. Disney Adventure carries around 6,700 passengers across 7 themed areas including Marvel Landing and Toy Story Place. Robert Downey Jr. christened the ship in March 2026, telling the crowd, "You bring the theme and I'll bring the thunder." Disney deployed Adventure year-round in Singapore, sailing cruises to nowhere, essentially a floating Disney theme park. Over 90% of its initial guests were first-time Disney cruisers, and most had never cruised at all. Disney CEO Bob Iger called it a floating ambassador for the Disney brand in a region with huge brand affinity. Royal Caribbean flinched. They pulled their large Quantum-class ship Ovation of the Seas out of Singapore and replaced it with Navigator of the Seas, a vessel with roughly half the capacity. And at D23 in August 2024, Disney announced 5 more ships for delivery between 2027 and 2031, including the first Disney ship in Japan, and a new smaller class designed to visit ports that can't handle the megaships. Disney's cruise division generated $347 million in profit in fiscal year 2024, nearly doubling the prior year. To put the pricing pressure in perspective, a family of 4 pays around $9,800 on Disney for a cruise that costs around $2,700 on Carnival. That is a 255% premium, and Disney still sells out. That kind of pricing power is what keeps the Big Three's executives up at night. But the threats weren't just coming from lifestyle brands and entertainment empires. A wave of ultra-luxury entrants went after the Big Three's most profitable passengers, the wealthy travelers willing to pay top dollar for premium cabins. Viking Ocean Cruises was the biggest success story. Founded by Norwegian shipping magnate Torstein Hagen, Viking launched its first ocean ship in 2015 with just 928 passengers. Industry insiders laughed. As Viking's own CFO recalled, there was actual laughter at an early ship delivery when Hagen suggested a fleet of 20 vessels. Nobody is laughing now. Viking operates 12 ocean ships with up to 23 planned by 2031, plus 2 expedition vessels and over 85 riverboats. Their May 2024 IPO on the New York Stock Exchange raised $1.54 billion and valued the company at $10.3 billion. Shares nearly doubled within 6 months. By mid-2025, Viking had $5.6 billion in advance bookings with 96% of capacity sold out. Viking's formula is the anti-mega ship. No children under 18, no casinos, no umbrella drinks, no photography sales, and no charge for alternative restaurants. Hagen was withering about the competition, saying if you don't have any real experiences, you create artificial islands, and that there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the product Viking wants to be known for. Meanwhile, the Ritz-Carlton Yacht Collection suffered one of the most spectacular launch disasters in recent cruise history. Their first ship, Evrima, was delayed 33 months and had its inaugural cruise rescheduled 8 separate times, partly because the original Spanish shipyard had never built a luxury cruise ship before. They built fishing vessels. But Ritz-Carlton eventually found its footing, and their second ship, Ilma, became the world's first Forbes 5-star rated cruise ship. The most dramatic newcomers are arriving in 2026 and 2027. 4 seasons. Launches in March 2026 with just 95 suites for 190 passengers and features a 9,975 square foot funnel suite, the largest suite ever designed for a cruise ship. Orient Express. Corinthian enters service in June 2026 as the world's largest sailing yacht, stretching 220 meters with 3 100-meter rotating masts that achieved 12 knots on wind power alone during sea trials, carrying just 108 passengers. And Aman at Sea's Amangati is coming in spring 2027 with only 47 suites. The luxury cruise market was worth $9.7 billion in 2024 and is projected to reach $27 billion by 2037. That growth rate is nearly double mainstream cruising. Small ship preference has increased by 44%, and these luxury entrants are systematically pulling the highest spending passengers out of the Big Three's premium suites and into intimate yacht experiences. So, how did the Big Three respond to all of this? They did what giants do when they feel threatened. They built bigger. Royal Caribbean constructed Icon of the Seas, which launched in January 2024 as the largest cruise ship ever built. At 248,663 gross tons, carrying a maximum of 7,600 passengers, with an estimated construction cost of $2 billion, this ship is essentially a floating city. It features the largest water park at sea with 6 slides, 7 pools, the first swim-up bar at sea, 27 restaurants, and 22 bars. When Icon of the Seas was announced, it generated the most reservations in Royal Caribbean's entire 53-year history, and the ship was still 15 months from launching. Sister ship Star of the Seas entered service in August 2025. Legend of the Seas comes in 2026. Hero of the Seas in 2027, a 5th in 2028. Royal Caribbean may build up to 7 of these Icon-class ships through 2036. CEO Jason Liberty insisted the arms race wasn't about other cruise lines. He said Royal Caribbean spends almost no time thinking about cruise competitors and that they're competing directly with places like Orlando and Las Vegas. He even admitted the genesis of Icon of the Seas was asking how they could close the gap to Orlando, to Vegas. He said they were competing with Taylor Swift. But the private island spending tells the real story. Royal Caribbean poured $250 million into Perfect Day at Coco Cay in the Bahamas, which drew 3.2 million guests in 2024 alone. They then announced $600 million for a new perfect day destination in Mexico, plus Royal Beach Club locations in Nassau, Santorini, and Cozumel. The total private destination investment now exceeds $1 billion. MSC Cruises executed the most aggressive shipbuilding spree of all. The privately held family-owned line committed roughly $20 billion in ship orders in 2025 alone, split between the Chantier de l'Atlantique and Meyer-Werft shipyards. MSC World America, their newest megaship, carrying 6,762 passengers, was specifically designed with American tastes in mind. Think bourbon bars, comedy clubs, and a 1920s speakeasy. MSC opened the world's largest cruise terminal in Miami and declared it would grow from 23 ships to potentially 35 or more by the early 2030s. Carnival Corporation, weighed down by $27 billion in pandemic-era debt, took a different approach. They invested $600 million into Celebration Key, a private island destination on Grand Bahama that opened in July 2025 with a mile-long beach, a 10-story waterslide complex, and capacity for 4 ships simultaneously. CEO Josh Weinstein focused on profitability over growth, posting record revenue of $26.6 billion in 2025. And perhaps the most existential threat of all is regulatory. The EU's FuelEU Maritime regulation, which took effect in January 2025, mandates escalating greenhouse gas reductions that will reach 80% cuts by 2050. From 2030, cruise ships must connect to shore power in major European ports or face penalties of up to €5 million per vessel per year. Currently, 44% of new ships on order are powered by liquefied natural gas. Viking is building the world's first hydrogen-powered cruise ship, Viking Libra, scheduled for late 2026. And Orient Express Corinthian's wind-powered solid sail technology proved in sea trials that massive sailing yachts can reach 12 knots on sails alone. So who wins the cruise wars? The honest answer is that nobody knows yet. The big three are posting record revenues, record bookings, and record profits. Royal Caribbean's net profit margin hit 23% in 2025, with half of all their passengers now being millennials or younger. The industry is currently 75% booked for the coming year, compared to a historical norm of 60 to 65%. But for the first time in decades, the big three face competitors with genuine differentiation. Virgin has cultural credibility with travelers who never considered cruising. Disney has unmatched intellectual property and pricing power that borders on absurd. Viking has intellectual prestige and is building hydrogen ships. And the sovereign wealth funds of China and Saudi Arabia have nearly limitless capital and decades-long strategic horizons. The global cruise ship order book currently stands at 74 ships, worth $76.5 billion through 2036. North America has 20 million cruisers from a population of 350 million. Asia has just 4 million from 2.2 billion. The math is obvious. Whoever captures Asia wins the next era of cruising. The era of the comfortable cruise oligopoly is over. The cruise wars have only just begun. If you want to see how another industry got blindsided by unexpected competitors, that video is on screen now. Subscribe so you don't miss it.